Welcome to J Lowe Artist YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me on this artistic adventure. Today we'll be working with charcoal. So you'll need your number 2 or HB pencil, a kneaded eraser, and use your oldest, rattiest kneaded eraser. This charcoal has a tendency to mess up a kneaded eraser. And a piece of charcoal, anything you'd like. There are several different types of charcoal. You'll need a cotton swab for blending, and anything else that you think you'll need. Go ahead and have it close by. And let's get started. Thanks for drawing with me. It's always nice to have people to draw with. So the first thing we're going to do is when you're drawing with charcoal, that charcoal is so black and so smearable, we're going to kind of set it aside for now. And our cotton swab, we're going to set that aside. But the first thing we want to do is kind of figure out where we want everything to go. And we want to take up the entire sheet of paper. So do you want this off to the side? Do you want it, right in the middle? If it were me, I'm going to put this right off to the side some, because it kind of lends itself better to good composition. That whole idea of putting things in the middle is boring. So if you slide it off to the side, and you can just kind of start out and say, I want her body to be about right in here somewhere. So you can kind of just sketch that in as a line. I often get told, no, I don't draw people, I draw stick figures. Well, guess what? We're going to start out with a stick figure. There's her head. And now you need to know if you've got enough space for everything in there. So you count heads. Say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got enough room for 7 heads. Not quite enough. So now I've got to make that head just a little smaller. Just a little smaller. Now I can count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So about somewhere down in there, right towards the very, very bottom, I should have enough space for everything. Now, most people are anywhere between 6.5 to 9 heads tall. 9 heads would be a really tall person. She's up on her tippy toes. So we may go right below that a little bit, but you don't want to go too far down. So then, as you're kind of looking at her and you say, okay, if this is her head, this is the size of her head, right there, then her neck is going to kind of come down and curve this way. That's her spine. Think about the spine. And then you have the thorax, this part of the body from the shoulders to the hip. And that is, if you go down 2 heads, so you go 1 from below the head. So if this is the size of your head, you can use your pencil to measure too. I love these pencils because I have these little marks on them. You can use that to measure. But if you just go down 1, 2, about right down in there, that's about where her belly button is, by the way. About 2 heads, top to bottom. And you just make this shape, just a simple shape. That's her shoulders. And look at the angle of her clavicles, those bones that across the collar from shoulder to shoulder. You want to get that angle in there. And then you have your ilium, your hip bone that kind of comes out this way. And it's about exactly the same as this, but just upside down and connected onto the side. So you come up here, and this is about a 1.5 heads. You can kind of come down. You can measure that, come down here, put that same kind of thing in. It's kind of an hourglass kind of a look. And then your femur fits into the ilium right there. And it kind of, there's a little curve to the top of the femur. And everything curves. So if I come down here, the femur is going to slightly curve this way. This one's going to slightly curve this way. You can see that back leg. It's kind of hard to see, but it's going to curve, and it's going to come down too, about like that. This one curves out, and then it kind of curves in slightly. So there's kind of an S curve right there. Very, very light S curve. And then this foot is going to come off, and you can just kind of use it like a little oval. And it's not straight up underneath. But one thing you do know about balance that we need to kind of figure out about balance, and my foot is off because I'm looking at this like this. If you take your ankle, and when you're up on one foot, it will be directly under that little divot between the clavicles right there. Your foot is going to be directly under it. That is balance. Your body has to do that, or else you'll topple one way or another. And so I can say, okay, this leg is over too far. Look how she looks like she's leaning over. And so in order to keep her from doing that, I've got to take that leg and move it over so it's directly under that little divot between the clavicles. Okay, right? Your sternum comes up, your clavicles kind of attach, and there's this little divot right there. That is the center of your upper body, and that's your center of balance. So now I can come over and go, oh, okay, I need to move that leg, that little S-curvy leg, over this way, curve, and now the foot kind of comes under there. And it's got to be directly under that. Does that make sense? And it really doesn't matter who you're drawing. Whatever that load-bearing leg is, should be right under that little area, whatever that is called. Does anybody know what that's called? The little divot that's there. We did the divot under the nose. Does anybody remember what that's called? It's called a philtrum. Okay, now the arms. So the arms, if you measure the size of the head and you go from the shoulder to the elbow, and you can say, well, okay, there's the elbow. And you go from the head, from the shoulder to the elbow is going to be about right there. And again, it's just a little stick figure. There's one there. And the same distance between the elbow and the wrist is this distance between the head. Okay, and you can kind of make a little mark over there and go, okay, that's where the wrist goes. Then you've got this nice hand, and you just do a little oval for the hand. And you can also figure out where the fingers go by just these little lines. This is like Egyptian. You ever looked at Egyptian hieroglyphics? Their little hands look like little sausages. So I'm just going to take four little lines and just put them out there. You just want the feeling of the hand. And same thing with this upper arm. I have not quite bent enough. I need to bend it. There's the wrist. And voila, there's the hand. Little circle for the palm, and then the little sausages coming off of it. And in this instance, they're just little lines. They are foreshortened. They're kind of bent down. So you just kind of hold on to that. Okay, here's our stick figure in perfect proportion. Now all we have to do is add some thickness to it. And most of the thicknesses are triangles or rectangles. And some people will use ovals instead. But if you think about your upper arm, it's just an elongated triangle from the wrist to the elbow. From the elbow to the arm is just, and you can do a little oval if you want. Some people like ovals. I just do little kind of a rectangular shape. Your deltoid is a triangle. There's a triangle there. And a triangle over here. You guys know what a deltoid is? Your shoulder muscles. There's a little sweep up into the neck. There's a muscle called the sternocleidoid mastoid that comes off the ear and connects to that little divot that's in between the clavicles. And you can see that predominantly in her neck. So you can throw that in. The other one's there too, but it's relaxed, and so it's twisting a little bit. All muscles pull. There are no muscles that push. And I'm just going to do that little kind of egg shape for her head. And we can come back into that. But right now we're just adding that thickness to it. Here's another triangle for the deltoid. Up into the elbow there, and then again it's kind of this little, it's thinner towards the wrist, thicker towards the elbow. And as we go, we're just going to adjust and adjust and adjust till it's exactly the way we want it to be. If you go down exactly one head, so if you measure from one head to the bottom, that's where your pectoralis major goes in, your chest. Sometimes I'll just do a little line because that represents the shadow. And then your rib cage kind of comes out like this. There's a kind of a little circle in between. That's your abdominal muscles. But your rib cage is going to go down until it hits that curve, kind of curve up. There's another one over there, so you've got your little rib cage right there. And then your lumbars, your lower back here, just kind of turns. And your ilium is kind of attached right here. And your ilium's kind of this kind of flattened heart shape. So you've got your hip, it's kind of curved. Your muscles of your leg, the same as with your arm. You could do little ovals if you want, but if you go down 1.5 heads, so if you go down one head, 1, 2 heads, and then you come up about half of that knee is about right in there. So somewhere towards there. There's a little bone that goes over your knee. It's called the patella. And that's that little divot that you see above the knee. Wherever that patella is where your foot is facing. So if you can see all of the patella, that foot's got to be coming straight out at you. If you only see part of it, then that foot is kind of over. So this one, we see almost all of the patella. And so you just kind of come down into that. There's a little curve there. And then you have, there's just a couple muscles that are attached to the back side of your body that you can partially see from the front side. One of them is your trapezius muscle, which is this one right here. And the other one is your gastrocnemius, which comes off your leg right there. Your gastrocnemius basically has 2 sections. There's one right here and then one on the inside. And both of them you can see from the front side. And they come around your bones. You got 2 bones down here, the tibia and fibula. And they kind of come down like this. And you can see that gastrocnemius muscle on one side and then curves in. The other one is bigger. It curves down into the foot. A lot of people worry about the ankle bone. You don't want to worry about that too much, because as your leg kind of comes down and curves, your foot's going to kind of pick up on that and go down in. And just a nice curve where the foot goes, and you got it. And so that other leg is more side view, and so you're really going to see that gastrocnemius muscle in the back, that nice round oval muscle that goes right there. And then it goes down into the ankle. And you see that the bones of your foot kind of curve out and then flatten down. Then your toe shoes, your ballet slippers there. I know what they're called because I had a daughter that was in ballet. So now we have the proportioning and everything's done. Now we can concentrate on the details. If you want to, at this point, you can put in her outfit. Nobody cares if that outfit is longer or shorter. But if your body parts are longer or shorter, then people kind of notice those things. So you don't have a lot of stress about doing the outfit. So I'm just going to throw that in. And again, think simple shapes. Triangles, squares, rectangles, whatever it takes. Take it in chunks, in pieces. So the face is very important. Even when you're doing figure studies, some people just leave the face out because it's too small, or it's I don't know, but it still is very important. So I'm going to show you how to do small faces. So because we're looking into the face like this, her forehead is foreshortened a little bit. In other words, as it curves around the head, the turns around, it's going to look a little shorter, a little smaller than normal. So we can't kind of normalize things. Plus, everything's going to curve. So your head this way curves, your eyebrows curve, your nose is going to curve, your mouth is going to curve. All that stuff happens with this kind of curve like this. Also look at where the tip of the nose is as concerned with the eyes. The tip of the nose and the eyes are almost level. It's because you're looking up into it, and that nose, because it sticks out of the head, looks like it's closer to the eyes. And so you can mark that in if you want. You can just go in and say, okay, here's the eye. It's going to be about right in there. There's the tip of the nose, pretty close to that. Here's the other eye. And you just kind of mark them in where you think they should go, and then adjust it from there. The last thing you want to do is use your kneaded eraser to get rid of anything that is going to confuse you. So if there's something in there that you've drawn lines and you go, oh, I don't like those lines. But most of these lines are going to blend anyway as we go. There's a lot that we don't erase. Too many people, they'll look at something, oh, that's not right, I'm going to erase it. And the problem is you lose your point of reference. You erase it, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I don't remember where that was. So you put it in again, wrong. I'm just going to use my pencil now to just kind of put in some hair and just kind of act as a guide. Where am I going to put everything? Just going to guide me to it. I like her long hair. It's another thing, if you make her hair a little longer than normal, that's okay. Most people that have long hair would like that. So now everything is in there that we need it as a guideline. So now you just adjust. Kind of look at what you've got and maybe adjust it a little bit. Do I need to change anything? Does anything need to be longer or shorter or thicker or thinner? Because everything is now on the surface. Once we start using charcoal, it's not going to be on the surface anymore. It's not going to be easy to erase. So now what I want to do is I'm going to really grind this in. I'm going to take my charcoal now while it's nice and sharp, because after a while it's going to dull out a little bit. But while it's nice and sharp, I'm going to go in and do the face. And the first thing you want to do is any of the dark areas you think you see. And I'm going to zoom into her upper torso to let us see her face a little bit more. So what I want to do is I want to pick up these shadows under her eyes and her long eyelashes that are very dark, her eyebrows, and then these little shadows that are over it. The shadow under the nose and the mouth, and any of this under the chin and on the neck. And then do the hair. Or you could do the hair first, I guess, but kind of up to you. I'm just going to go in and just start picking some of that out. And I am not stuck with my initial drawing. What I drew first, if it's not right, I'm going to change it. Just keep it very simple. Let me zoom into what I'm doing. Just keep it simple. I'm not worried about details so much here. Even though it kind of looks like I'm putting in details, I'm just keeping it simple. It's almost like doing a cartoon. I mean, you've got your edges, but you really want to just pick out the darkest areas that you see. When you're doing hair, don't worry about lines around the hair. The hair will take care of itself. Just think dark area. Just do the dark area. And you can leave little areas just kind of floating out there. That'll all take care of itself. Hair does that. Anyway, it floats around. Does all sorts of crazy things. And if it's light, just go ahead and leave it out. Some of those edges are quite light on the top. So I'm just going to leave them out. Here's a thing that people kind of think of it like spaghetti, but it's not. It's a mass of light and dark. So I'm just throwing in the dark areas, leaving a few little light areas out so that it kind of looks like hair. There is a light line under her arm, and rather than draw that line, just use the hair to define that edge. So I'm just going to go in, I'm just going to take this hair, I'm going to use it to define the edge of her arm. Next week, when we do ink, we'll find that we use a whole lot of line, but not defining edges. We just use it to define shapes, and the edges take care of themselves. If that doesn't make sense, it will on Friday. Okay, you with me so far? So what I'm going to do now is, again, I'm just picking out the darkest areas. So all these little shadows under her neck, you just pick out anything that is really dark. And I'll show you what we'll do with that. So like I haven't drawn a shadow up her neck, but what we're going to do is we're going to take our cotton swab and we're going to pull out some of this charcoal and bring it up into the head. We're just going to use that to pull all that out. Now, if you think to yourself, oh, I don't have enough charcoal on there, or there's just not enough there, grab it from her hair and bring it over. Little parts of her face too, if you wanted to. You could grab some from her hair and bring it over and put it on her cheek. Just a little bit. It's just soft. And you can grab it from her eye, from her eyebrow, any of that. You're just going to take that cotton swab and just manipulate it around a little bit. Now, it's pretty tiny, so we don't have a lot of space to deal with. So I'm just barely rubbing that, just touch it up a little bit. I can grab it from her hair and bring it in over here. When you get to that point, you can do the hair. And the cool thing about this is that nice soft hair that she's got, those little edges will just be soft and fuzzy and let it look soft. I mean, hair is kind of soft anyway. So just blend that in. And there's our head. Wherever it looks kind of dark, give it a little rub. And if you think, oh, that's too much, you know, I put too much in, then take your kneaded eraser, you come back in and just touch it. Touch. And really, that's about all that we want to have done in the face. We could, if we wanted to, come back into it and do a little bit more. But clean it up, anything that needs to be cleaned up. Anything that needs to go or feel like it needs to go darker. But notice I didn't do a lot of, I kind of almost touch it with the cotton swab just to soften it. But you don't want to do a whole lot of rubbing in places. You can go even more detailed if you want, if you've got time, but we don't have a ton of time. I want to keep going on with the rest of the figure. And the hands, I want to show you how to do perfect hands every time. And that is simplify it. 2 or 3 little strokes and you got it. I'll start out with this, her right hand, our left side. And I'm just going to start out, and there's one finger. It's just a little curve. Female fingers tend to be a little pointier. And so if the tip of the finger looks a little pointy, that's a good thing. Male fingers can get kind of blocky. So if you're doing a man, you just kind of round out that tip of the finger. So there's one finger, and it's just a light, it's almost like a stick figure. I'll show you what we're going to do with it. Okay, so it kind of looks like a little stick figure. Then if you take your cotton swab and you come into it and just blend it just a little bit, all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, that's a finger. And then you just take your kneaded eraser and just clean up that top edge. There's your finger. Don't worry about things like fingernails. Here's another one. This is just the shadow down the finger. That's just the shadow. And then you take your cotton swab and you'll blend it. Clean it up with your kneaded eraser and it's done. Piece of cake. Anything that is dark, just like we did with the face. Anything that's dark, throw that in first. Your fingers should all be kind of like the legs too. They curve. Every bone in your body curves. It has to. If it doesn't, then when you jump or when you walk, you'll break your bones. They have to flex. There's this dark shadow that comes down her wrist. This little triangle. And throw that in. And then along her arm, you can kind of forget that. Don't even put it in. Then pick up maybe around where the elbow is. There is a shadow right there. If you wanted to throw in that little coarse shadow, you could. Just a little bit. And then the elbow. Of course, the elbow is going to stick out. There's two bones right there. And they both attach, one on either side. Your ulna and your radius. Usually right around that bone, it's going to be sharper. You're going to have a sharper shadow. So you just pick out those darkest shadows. I'm not worried about the curve of the arm. Don't draw a line there. We'll take care of that later. That's really about it. The rest of it is done with your cotton swab. Now, if you have a tortillon, you can use that too. But your cotton swab, you just kind of come in there and you just kind of blend it. There's a finger there, finger there, finger there. There's a thumb in there somewhere. I'm just going to use my kneaded eraser to take out that thumb. Now I'm going to take this shape that comes down here, down the wrist, and just pull it down. This is your triceps on the back, your biceps on the front. And that bottom edge, you can go bigger or smaller, whatever you need. You can take that kneaded eraser and just clean it up. There's that top edge. I just let that take care of itself. There's no line there. Everybody knows where it's at. One thing that I like to do every now and then is I'll take a piece of tracing paper, lay over the top, and then you can put your hand on that, and that'll help it from smudging. Piece of paper towel works too, but I have learned to just not put my hand down there. So oftentimes when I draw, I'll put my little finger down like this and just kind of rest my hand on my little finger. Or I'll turn and twist my paper so that my hand isn't on the part I've drawn. But you're right, that is one of the hardest things, is to keep things from smudging. So I'm just cleaning up everything with my kneaded eraser. There's a little edge here under her arm where the striations of her muscles kind of pick up. You can do that with your kneaded eraser as well. There are some shadows of her hair on her arm right there. If you choose, you could put those in. I'm not sure that they're absolutely necessarily needed there, but you could, and you could do that with your cotton swab. You can just go in from your hair and just do a little smudge there. And you can always come in later and clean them up. But this is a figure study, so we're just trying to get as much as we can in the least amount of time. Because remember, if we're drawing dancers, they're not going to stay in one place. They're going to move on you. There was a very famous artist that was almost blind at the end of his days. His name was Degas. And he loved to go into the studios and paint dancers. He would go in there and he'd paint the dancers, and there towards the end he was doing everything with pastels because he couldn't see well enough to use his oil paints. But they move on you. My hand is not quite in the right place here. I've got to go up a little bit. If I look at her eye and go straight up from her eye, that's about where her hand is. This one needs to be up just a little bit. So I'm gonna just adjust it as I draw here. So just a little edge here, a little edge there. But for the most part, you'll leave a lot out. There's that shadow that goes down the arm. Some of this part, you can't even hardly see it. So if you can't see it, then don't draw it. You know it's there, but if you draw it in, it's going to look kind of silly. So just leave it out. And then you just take your cotton swab, do a little blending, any place you think you see. And if it's really light, just leave it out. You'll just take your cotton swab, and as you blend down, be mindful of the edges, but you don't have to draw them in. Again, the last thing to do, just use your kneaded eraser and just define your edges. Just figure out where they're going to go and just define them. So the important part really has been done. Heads and hands, those people look at those things, and if they're not quite right, then everybody's like, oh. But now they're done. Everything's good. And the rest of this, we can kind of do it quickly, because folds in the fabric, as long as the form is correct, well, the folds are going to look okay. So I'm just going to go into this now. I'm going to start out with any of the dark areas that I see. I'm going to put those in. And they might be folds in the fabric. They might be part of the body as it's turning. I'm not worried about all that stuff. I'm just going to throw it in as best as I can. Blend it. Put a little bit of kneaded eraser around there and clean it up, and then we're done. But notice how we haven't used lines around things. We're defining our edges, but we're just letting them do their thing. There is a form of art that you take your medium, whatever it is, paint or pencil or whatever, and you manipulate it the best way you can, but you understand that it has a life too, and that it can do other things than what you're trying to get it to do. So you try to give it a little bit of leeway to have its own voice, its own little life. Notice too, I'm using the side of my pencil. That's so I can get a lot more charcoal on there quickly. And it's soft, it's on the surface, I can blend that. These core shadows that go down the leg are just neat. They define that muscle. One of the largest muscles of the body is that thigh muscle there. Vastus lateralis. The shadow on her off leg, on the leg that's behind, defines the front leg. That's kind of fun. So now I just take my cotton swab. I can use any of that dry stuff to get any shadows that I feel like I need. And it is really only dependent upon how much time and effort you want to put into it. The more detail you have, the more time it takes. And since we don't have a ton of time, I think we did pretty good to get the right proportions, got most of the form in. I like how her dress is very translucent as it comes out too. That's really neat. Trying to get that with your values and your lights and darks. That's a good challenge for you. Last thing you do is you do not want to have your ballerina floating. Floating ballerinas are a little disconcerting. So give her a little shadow. Take your cotton swab, just on the very bottom where her feet are, give her a little shadow. Those little folds, the little wrinkles are easy to get with your kneaded eraser. You can just come in and just touch up some of the lightest areas. And all of a sudden you've got these nice folds. One of the last things you do, of course, is sign it. Good place to sign it would be like right under that area, or maybe over here. It's up to you. But sign it, put it on the table on your way out. And thank you for being here. Thanks for drawing with me. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you learned something. And hopefully it made your day just a little bit better. Because art
makes everything better.
Makes life better. It does.